The Zarth fortress loomed under a dark, alien sky, its jagged towers piercing through clouds like cruel talons. The air around it felt thick and oppressive, carrying the distant echoes of chants from within. Inside, the Zarth, a race known for their ruthless conquest, prepared for their most sacred ritual. In their eyes, humanity was a weak, fragile species, little more than prey to feed their monstrous beasts. Tonight, another human child would meet the same fate as many before her. The chamber where the ritual was held was massive, its walls adorned with alien glyphs glowing a cold blue. The room was dimly lit, adding to the sense of dread that filled the air. Around the edges, Zarth nobles watched in anticipation, their faces twisted with superiority. The ritual was not just a sacrifice, it was a display of power. Humans were brought from across the galaxy, thrown into the pit as mere fodder for the Zarth's prized creature, a beast bred for killing, its hunger never sated. In the center of the chamber, the pit awaited. It was deep, filled with shadows, and within it, something stirred. A low growl echoed, sending shivers through the few human captives who still had hope of survival. But for one child, tonight was her turn. The Zarth priest, draped in ornate robes, lifted his hands to signal the next sacrifice. A girl, no older than 10, was dragged forward. Her name was Alara. Alara was small, her frail frame contrasting starkly with the imposing Zarth soldiers who flanked her. Despite the fear that surely gripped her, she walked with a steady pace, her eyes wide but clear. She didn't cry or struggle as many others had before her. Her calmness was unsettling, even to the Zarth, who thrived on the fear of their victims. They mistook her silence for submission, unaware that something far more powerful lay dormant within her. As Alara approached the edge of the pit, the Zarth began their chants again, louder this time, as if summoning the beast from its lair. The ground trembled, and the creature emerged from the shadows, a towering monstrosity unlike anything from Earth. It was a grotesque fusion of reptilian scales and insect-like limbs, with rows of jagged teeth that dripped with venom. Its eyes glowed a sickly green as it focused on the small figure before it, clearly ready to devour her as it had so many others. The Zarth nobles leaned forward in their seats, smug satisfaction written across their faces. To them, this was the natural order. Humans were nothing more than weak animals, fit to be consumed. The beast lunged forward, and Alara stood still, her tiny form dwarfed by the creature's massive frame. The Zarth priest watched intently, his hands clasped in ritualistic fervor, expecting another easy slaughter. But then, something changed. Alara lifted her hand, her small palm facing the creature as if in silent command. The beast, mid-lunge, froze. The crowd gasped, confusion spreading like wildfire among them. The Zarth had seen humans panic, scream, and flee, but never this. Never had they seen a human stand still in the face of such terror, let alone halt the beast with nothing but a raised hand. The beast, now inches from Alara, let out a low growl, but it didn't move forward. Its glowing eyes flickered, as if fighting an unseen force. The Zarth priest, his confidence momentarily shaken, shouted commands at the creature, but it did not obey. Instead, the monstrous being lowered its head, almost submissively, and took a step back from the girl. Alara's eyes, wide with a strange inner light, met the beast's gaze, unblinking and unafraid. The pit, once a symbol of inevitable death, now held the audience in a grip of silence. The beast stood frozen before Alara, its hulking form towering over her small frame, yet it made no move to strike. The Zarth nobles shifted uneasily in their seats, confusion creeping into their faces. This had never happened before. The beast always obeyed, it always killed. What had stopped it? The priest barked out commands in their harsh alien tongue, but the creature remained still, as if held back by an invisible force. Alara's eyes were glowing now, a soft but intense blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the beast's uneasy breaths. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she felt it, a deep surge of power from within her, a force she had never been able to control. It was as if the fear she'd felt moments ago had transformed into something else, something far more powerful. The beast, once a symbol of terror, now seemed subdued, almost tamed in her presence. The Zarth priest, his arrogance melting into anger, rushed forward, shouting at the creature again. The nobles in the crowd began to murmur among themselves, unsure of what they were witnessing. They had come for a ritual, for a spectacle of death and dominance. But now a human child had somehow managed to do what none of them could. She had halted the beast. As the beast stayed back, Alara's mind raced, and memories flooded her consciousness. She wasn't an ordinary child, though she had always tried to seem like one. From a young age, strange things had happened around her, things she couldn't explain. Her parents had noticed it first, the way objects would move when she was upset, the odd flickers of light that danced around her when she was scared. They had tried to protect her, to keep her hidden from the world, afraid of what people might do if they discovered her powers. But when the Zarth raided Earth and took her, her parents' efforts were in vain. For as long as she could remember, she had been different. On Earth, she had felt isolated because of her abilities, forced to keep her power a secret. No one else around her seemed to share her strange gifts, and her parents warned her to stay quiet, to blend in. But here, in this pit on this alien world, something had changed. The fear that had always kept her power locked away had vanished, replaced by a calm certainty. She wasn't just some frightened child waiting to be devoured, she was in control. The beast, sensing this shift, backed away further, its eyes still locked on hers. Alara could feel its thoughts, its hunger, its primal instincts, but also a strange connection. She wasn't just stopping it, she was communicating with it. The power surged again, this time more focused, more intentional. The beast lowered its head, a gesture of submission that sent another wave of shock through the watching Zarth. The priest, now frantic, activated a control device strapped to his wrist. A sudden jolt of electricity surged through the beast's body, causing it to roar in pain. It reared back, its massive claws striking the ground near Alara, sending tremors through the pit. The Zarth believed they could force the creature back into submission with their technology, but they underestimated Alara's power. She reached out with her mind, her glowing eyes narrowing in concentration, and with a single thought, she overrode the Zarth's control. The device sparked and fizzled, its lights going out as the beast stood motionless once more, refusing to obey the commands of its Zarth masters. The priest recoiled in horror, stumbling back from the edge of the pit as the crowd erupted into shouts of disbelief. Alara could feel the tension building around her. The Zarth were terrified, but also furious. Their ritual had been interrupted, their dominance challenged, and by a human no less. But Alara wasn't finished. She stepped forward, her small hands still raised, her gaze still fixed on the beast. The energy inside her was growing, swirling with each heartbeat, but she controlled it now. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. The Zarth, realizing that their control over the situation was slipping, began to discuss among themselves, their voices rising in urgency. How could this be happening? How could a mere human child possess such power, enough to tame their most dangerous beast? Their confusion turned to panic as they realized they had no control over the events unfolding before them. Alara took another step forward, and the beast obeyed, lowering itself to the ground in front of her, a submissive posture that no Zarth had ever seen it take before. She reached out and placed her hand gently on its massive head, feeling its coarse, scaled skin beneath her fingers. It was no longer a creature of terror, not to her. She had tamed it, or perhaps it had chosen to follow her, sensing something in her that the Zarth couldn't understand. But controlling the beast wasn't enough. Alara knew the Zarth wouldn't just let her walk away. She could feel the stares of the nobles, the priest's trembling fury, the entire weight of their society pressing down on her. They would not accept defeat easily. They would come for her, they would try to take her power away, or worse. For a brief moment, Alara thought of her family back on Earth. She wondered if they knew she was still alive, if they were safe. She had been taken so suddenly, torn from her home, and had no way of knowing what had happened to them. But standing here now with this newfound power, she realized that she wasn't the same frightened child anymore. She was something more, something the Zarth had never anticipated. The beast rumbled softly beneath her hand, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the chamber. It was a sound of calm, of trust. Alara could feel the bond between them solidifying, and with it, a sense of purpose began to form in her mind. The Zarth had taken her, had tried to use her as nothing more than a sacrifice, but now the tables had turned. She wasn't just going to survive, she was going to fight back. The Zarth leader, Vrak, a towering figure draped in ceremonial armor, stepped forward, his expression a mixture of disbelief and rage. He had watched the entire spectacle unfold, and now he was faced with a choice: attempt to regain control or acknowledge that they had underestimated humanity in the worst way possible. The tension in the chamber was palpable as Vrak approached the pit, his towering form casting a long shadow over the scene. His eyes, burning with rage, locked onto Alara, who still stood calmly beside the now subdued beast. The murmurs from the Zarth nobles grew louder, and whispers of fear spread through the crowd. Vrak had never seen anything like this: a human, a child, standing against them, wielding power they couldn't understand. Vrak's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and commanding. "You dare defy us, human? You dare think your kind can control what belongs to us?" His words were laced with arrogance, a deep-seated belief that the Zarth were superior in every way. He drew a weapon from his belt, an energy blade that hummed with deadly intent. "I will show you your place." Alara, still holding her hand on the beast's head, looked up at Vrak. There was no fear in her eyes, only calm determination. She had felt his anger, his belief in the Zarth's dominance, but she also sensed something deeper: fear. Fear of losing control, fear of the unknown. The Zarth had ruled through strength and intimidation for centuries, but now, faced with a challenge they couldn't overpower, their arrogance was cracking. "You don't understand, do you?" Alara said, her voice quiet but steady. "It's not about control. It's about something more." Vrak sneered. "More. Humans are weak. You are nothing but vermin, fit to serve or die. This is not your world, child. Your kind is destined to be crushed beneath our feet." Alara's gaze didn't waver. She could feel the beast beside her, its presence a reminder of her newfound strength. But more than that, she could feel something deeper: a connection to life itself, to the universe around her. The Zarth, with all their power, had failed to see it. They thought strength was everything that might made right. But Alara knew differently. As Vrak raised his blade ready to strike, Alara lifted her hand again, not in defense but in an invitation. She reached out, her mind extending beyond the physical, touching the very core of Vrak's being. He froze mid-strike, his muscles locking in place as an unseen force took hold of him. His eyes widened in shock as he realized what was happening. He could feel her in his mind, not just controlling his body but understanding him, seeing through the layers of arrogance and superiority he had built around himself. Vrak struggled, but it was futile. Alara's power wasn't born from a desire to dominate, like the Zarth's. It was something different, something the Zarth couldn't comprehend. She wasn't trying to defeat him, she was trying to show him. "You think power is about control," Alara said softly, her voice carrying through the chamber. "But real strength comes from understanding, from compassion." The Zarth nobles looked on in stunned silence as their leader stood frozen, caught in the grip of a force they couldn't see or understand. The beast remained calm beside Alara, no longer a threat, but a silent witness to the unfolding drama. The tension that had filled the room was now replaced by something else: uncertainty. Alara stepped forward, closer to Vrak, her hand still raised. "You've ruled by fear for so long that you've forgotten what it means to care for something, to protect it rather than control it." Vrak's face twisted in fury, but he couldn't move. His mind raged against the invisible bonds that held him, but deep down, a part of him understood the truth in her words. The Zarth had always seen themselves as the strongest, the rulers of the galaxy, but they had ruled through oppression, through domination. They had never faced a challenge like this, where their strength meant nothing. Alara released her hold on Vrak, stepping back. He stumbled slightly, lowering his weapon but still glaring at her with a mix of anger and confusion. "You think you can teach us? You are nothing." "Your kind is nothing," no, Alara replied, her voice calm. "We're more than you think. Humanity is more than you can imagine." The crowd of Zarth nobles watched in disbelief as Vrak, their most feared leader, faltered in the face of a human child. The air was thick with the weight of this moment, the clash of cultures and ideologies. The Zarth had always believed in strength above all, but now, faced with a power they didn't understand, their worldview was crumbling. Vrak took a step back, his confidence shaken but his pride still intact. "This changes nothing," he snarled. "We will find a way to control you, to break you." Alara shook her head. "You don't need to control everything. That's why you failed. You could be so much more if you stopped trying to dominate and started trying to understand." Her words struck deeper than any weapon. The Zarth, who had always prided themselves on their superiority, were being shown the limits of their understanding. Rock, standing before her, felt the weight of his people's arrogance pressing down on him. His hand tightened around his weapon, but he didn't strike. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Alara could feel the change. It wasn't just about physical strength or power anymore. This was a battle of beliefs, of philosophies. The Zarth had built their empire on domination, on the belief that they were destined to rule. But now, faced with a human who didn't want to conquer them, who only wanted them to see a different way, their foundation was cracking. The beast shifted beside her, its massive form quiet and calm, as if it too sensed the change in the air. The Zarth had once controlled this creature with fear and pain, but Alara had tamed it through understanding. It was a lesson that Vrak and the rest of the Zarth were only beginning to grasp. Vrak lowered his weapon, his expression dark but contemplative. He looked at Alara, then at the beast, and finally at the nobles behind him, who were waiting for him to make a decision. The room was silent, all eyes on him. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, heavier than any burden he had ever carried before. "This isn't over," Vrak said quietly, though his voice lacked the conviction it once held. "But perhaps we have underestimated you." Alara nodded, sensing that this was as close to an admission of defeat as Vrak would ever give. "We all have the capacity to grow, to change," she said. "Even you." The Zarth leader turned, walking slowly back to his seat, his mind clearly racing with thoughts he had never considered before. The nobles whispered among themselves, their confidence in their leader shaken. The Zarth, for the first time in their long history, were questioning their place in the universe. As Vrak retreated, the weight of the moment settled over the chamber. The Zarth nobles, once smug and arrogant, were now silent, their faces a mixture of confusion and unease. Alara stood still, the beast beside her, both calm and steady. She knew that the battle was not over, not in the way they had expected. The Zarth were proud, and their belief in their superiority was deeply ingrained. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was spreading. The beast let out a low rumble, its massive form shifting slightly as it lowered itself further to the ground, as if it were kneeling. The sight was both awe-inspiring and humbling. The creature, once a tool of terror for the Zarth, now showed a kind of reverence for Alara. The nobles gasped, some stepping back in fear, others in disbelief. This was not how their ritual was supposed to end. They had expected a brutal display of their dominance, a show of power that would reaffirm their place as rulers of the galaxy. Instead, they were witnessing the impossible. Alara, sensing the shift, turned her attention to the Zarth crowd. She could feel their fear, their uncertainty. But more than that, she felt a glimmer of something else: curiosity. For the first time, these aliens who had always seen humans as lesser beings were beginning to question that assumption. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, knowing that the next few moments could shape the future. "You don't have to live like this," she said, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. "You don't have to rule through fear and domination." "There's another way." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some Zarth seemed insulted by her words, their faces hardening in defiance. But others listened, their expressions softening, as if they were trying to understand. Alara continued, her calm demeanor never wavering. I'm not your enemy. Humanity isn't your enemy. We can work together. We can grow together. But that can only happen if you stop seeing us as something to control. We are more alike than you think. The Zarth priest, who had been watching in stunned silence, stepped forward, his face still twisted in disbelief. You speak as though we could be equals. The Zarth are superior. We have always been superior. It is our right to rule. Alara shook her head. No, it's not about being superior or inferior. It's about understanding that we all have value, that we can learn from each other. You have strength, yes, but strength alone doesn't make you great. Compassion, wisdom, and the ability to see beyond yourself, that's what makes someone truly strong. The priest looked as if he wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. His mind was racing, trying to process the idea that a human child was not only standing up to them, but offering them a chance at something different, something better. Vrak, who had been silent, finally spoke again, his voice quieter now, more measured. You think we can change? That we can simply cast aside centuries of belief, of dominance? That's not how the universe works, child. It's not easy, Alara admitted, her gaze steady on Vrak. But it's possible. You've ruled through fear for so long that you've forgotten what it means to trust, to cooperate. If you keep going down this path, you'll only face more resistance, more challenges. But if you open your minds, if you allow yourselves to see beyond power, you'll discover something far more valuable. Vrak stared at her, his eyes narrowing as he weighed her words. The Zarth had never been challenged like this before. They had never faced an enemy who didn't want to destroy them, who offered them a way forward instead of pushing them into the past. The silence in the chamber grew heavy, the tension palpable. Then, slowly, Vrak lowered his head, a gesture of acknowledgement, if not agreement. Perhaps. We have been blind. Perhaps there is more to strength than we thought. Alara nodded, sensing the shift in his tone. There's always more to learn, always more to understand. The nobles behind him began to stir, some protesting quietly, others murmuring in agreement. The Zarth Council had been shaken and the future of their empire was uncertain. But in that uncertainty there was hope. The change wasn't immediate, and not all would accept it right away, but the first steps had been taken. Alara turned to the beast, which had remained by her side throughout the confrontation. She felt the bond between them, the connection that had formed not through force, but through mutual respect. The creature had once been a symbol of terror, a weapon to subjugate others, but now it represented something different, an alliance, a new beginning. I'll go now, Alara said, looking back at Vrak and the priest. But remember what happened here. Remember that you don't have to be ruled by fear with that. Alara began to walk away, the beast following closely behind her. The Zarth watched in stunned silence as she made her way toward the exit of the chamber. The door opened, revealing the alien landscape beyond, and for the first time the Zarth didn't see a human as prey, but as something more, an equal, perhaps even a teacher. As Alara stepped outside, she felt the weight of the moment lift. The sky above was vast and open, filled with possibilities. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that the Zarth had been changed, even if just a little. They had seen a different side of humanity, one they had never expected. And that, she knew, was the beginning of something new. Back on Earth, Alara's family would never know the full story of what happened in that alien chamber. They would never see the beast she had tamed or the aliens she had faced down. But she would carry this experience with her, knowing that she had made a difference, not through violence, but through understanding. As she looked up at the stars, Alara smiled. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and challenges, but it was also full of hope. And humanity, with all its flaws and strengths, had a place in it, a place that was earned, not through domination, but through resilience, compassion, and the power to surprise even the most powerful beings in the universe. The beast rumbled beside her, a low, contented sound that seemed to echo her own thoughts. Together they walked into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the future was theirs to shape.